University in Houston. And thank you for joining us via Zoom, via Vimeo. I'm looking at a bunch of different screens here, so you're going to see my head swivel all around as I set up and control this great afternoon. So bear with me as I look like kind of a weirdo moving my head all around. But on behalf of the Department of Visual and Dramatic Arts at Rice University in Houston, and thanks also to New York's Printed Matter, welcome to the show. We're going to give everybody just a minute or so to join in, and then we'll get right to it. And I'll be drinking from a teacup occasionally, and the teacup has Gatorade in it. So think about that. Okay, enough shenanigans. Let's go, and everybody that's late can catch up. So when I think of protest art, I think of two names. I think of Goya, and I think of Sukkot. And unfortunately, Goya can't be with us today, but we do have Sukkot. So it's very exciting for us. Of course, you know, Goya's protest art is terrific, but I also am keen on Jack Kirby's protest art. This is Captain America punching Hitler in 1941, before the US entered the war against Germany. So Captain America has always had it kind of right. Of course, I was trained by cultural Marxists, and so when I think of protest art, immediately I think of the work surrounding May of 1968, and the fantastic work that was produced by the students and the Situationists. And then, of course, I lived in New York in the 90s, and New York in the 90s, ACT UP was incredibly active and highly inventive. And but I guess, you know, I'm promising a definition of protest art, and I haven't done it yet. I know protest art when I see it, and while this is art, I don't think it's protest art. I don't think it's part of the solution. So what does that make it? I won't pick on Jeff Koons anymore. He's actually a really nice guy. But I think that, you know, of course, now the protests of last summer eclipse everything that came before it, and it was the great thing about last summer is that in the wake of this sort of serial and ongoing tragedy, the tragedies that we're enduring, there's a lot of great art made as a result. And so that's a tiny silver lining in the context of everything. But as effective as last summer was, January 6th really got to me. I guess I'm nowhere near a definition of protest art, but I know what I don't like. So yeah, maybe with the group we can get at a definition of protest art. And I can't think of anybody better to help us think about protest art than the aforementioned Sukkot, a terrific artist. So I'm going to hand it over to Sue now.
Thank you, Chris. And good afternoon, everybody. You could start the slides now, Chris. Had a bit of trouble with the slides. So this first one is, I'm back to, I want the abolition of all animal use globally. And these are two versions. One, I lived next door to a slaughterhouse when I was a kid. And this is a more recent drawing in a slaughterhouse. Next, please, Chris. And everything to me is the sketches, everything. So wherever I go, whatever the situation, I need to use myself as collateral. So I need to be there. And Goya is the example, or Colwitz. And this is drawing in a slaughterhouse when I was 12. Next, please. And this is honoring all the trillions of animals that are slaughtered every year. And this needs to be on the same strata as a war crime. So this is back to, next please, the idea that we're in the middle of, obviously, an extinction. Next please. So the sketchbooks are so important because I'm not just a witness, I'm a witness without power. And people don't want to be put in that situation. And that's the situation from whence art comes. Next, please. This is, I watched these animals being unloaded outside a slaughterhouse. They hadn't had a drink for 3.5 days. And they drank the blood of the animals that had just been slaughtered before them. Next, please. Again, this is a fully automated slaughterhouse. We're going into full automation of all. Next, please. This man, this is in Canada. He'd lost all his fingers. This is meat packers, are the most at risk out of the working class globally. Next, please. And this is our perception of the world. We can't see over the fence. We're not looking over the wall to the other side. It's made very convenient for us not to see the prison industrial complex. We cannot conceive of what's happening now. And this is why art's very important. Next, please. This is the guys waiting for the next lot of animals to be slaughtered. This was on a book cover, Upton Sinclair. Next, please. This is a gas chamber. It's an older version of a gas chamber. This was in Canada also. This was torn out to have a much bigger gas chamber. So animals, hogs in this case, are being gassed because it's much faster than a continuous line system. So they can gas 6 to 8 hogs at the same time. Next, please. This is inside the gas chamber where it takes up to 30 seconds to die, and the animals will climb up the walls to get to oxygen. Next, please. And this is a very bad piece of art. It's trying to show mass extinction that needs to be a crime against, a crime of ecocide. Next, please. This is wet market. When we think of farmed animals, wild animals are also being farmed. So this brings me into next, please. This is hoof and mouth, which is millions of animals being buried alive. So capitalism says, let them eat dirt. So this reduces the market value of each person. And this is South Korea, and the blood of these animals went into people's drinking water. So they turn on the tap and it was blood. Next, please. Obviously, economics is the crime and the time is very soon. We don't have much longer. Next, please. This is Bruegel. It's silly. I was just, next, please. And this is Factory Farm, where animals go insane. We're just animals too. We're going insane. Next, please. These fish, some were still alive. This is San Francisco, where I was drawing. Next, please. This is live transport. So millions of animals are transported over the oceans for live slaughter, supposedly. The lambs born on board are minced. That's a 3.5-week journey to go from Australia to the Middle East. Next, please. This is what we see and is so normalized every day to us on every highway in America, which is animals being transported to slaughter in appalling conditions. And this one I call breath because I saw it. It was so cold, the animals were frozen to the sides of this truck. It was like minus 30 wind chill. Next, please. And this is all normalized. We see these trucks all the time. It's insanity. Next, please. Anyway, to my last breath, there will be an abolition of all animal use in this world. This is ractopamine, which is creating antibiotic resistance across all of human beings. It's also a growth hormone. That's why it's being used on farmed animals. Next, please. This you can't really see, but it's all the different zoonotic viruses. There's 1,500 of them. COVID is just one. It's a RNA virus, but I matched it up in our farmed animal grouping, Orwellian. Next, please. What's happening in India now is, as my friend Dr. Avery pointed out, is torture. Without oxygen, it's the same as waterboarding. You're literally gasping for breath and you can't have breath. Now, coronavirus is a respiratory virus that does a large part of the DNA, RNA is fish. So imagine fish gasping for breath. Next, please. And social distancing obviously doesn't happen in the meat industrial complex. So those workers were dying and the lines were being speeded up. Biden, I think on the first week, slowed the lines again, which is not a panacea, but it's something. Next, please. Modern man pursued by the ghosts of his meat. We have a lot of ghosts. Next, please. This is my friend, Peter Brand, who's a brilliant lawyer. And so I try and work with people that actually know the law, know what they're doing, know what's possible. And he's a genius. Next, please. This fish was still alive. So you see fishing boats around the Galapagos. And the next day, those fish, which are in danger, will be in San Francisco. Next, please. Sharks being defamed. Sharks create ecosystem in the oceans which are dying. Next, please. This is a slaughterhouse we went into, which was closed. We did rescue some of the animals. It was closed for a week. The animals still stayed alive until we got to them. Next, please. Slaughterhouse in Texas, New Mexico. Next, please. Slaughterhouse, Pennsylvania. So, next, please. Next. And this is the front end of the problem is never dealt with. It's just we're now dealing with the back end of the problem, which is zoonotic viruses that come from the meat industrial complex, come from all this. Next, please. Next, please. And I think this is the last one. You consume their terror. This is something we can all do today. We can stop consuming other persons. We don't need it. We certainly don't need it in the United States. There's so many other types of nutrition that we can do. And 37% of greenhouse gas from the meat industry. So we need to stop this. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks a lot, Sue. That's amazing. If you don't mind to mute yourself, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Stanfest, the artist and publisher based in outside Detroit or inside Detroit? Right.
Inside Detroit. right in the city.
Okay, it's all you.
We ready? Okay, here we go. Let's see. Let's do a little bit of sharing here. All right, and we go down to here. And there we go. Whoops. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Chris, for putting this together, and Stan and Sue for being on the panel with me. So I hope to present the clear facts alone of this strange beast of artist-publisher. And sometimes it's hard to know if I am an artist who dreams he is a publisher, or a publisher who dreams he is an artist, and whether this thing of publishing is a disease that's entered me, but may end up being the cure to the artist. So I need to work through these things of what this monstrous hybrid is, what I call a monstrous hybrid, and I'll explain why it's sometimes a monstrosity. So I am an artist, a practicing artist. I studied printmaking, and print runs through my blood. And much of the work I make responds to print culture, printed ephemera. So what I'm showing you right now are a couple of recent matchbooks in a series of 40 at present that sort of responds to what I see as a kind of sociopathy running through our culture, which sort of erodes empathy, the possibility of empathy. This is another piece of mine. I also do a lot of sign painting. It turns out that my grandfather was a sign painter in Detroit in the 1950s. So I'm interested in co-opting that interesting mix between image and text. And again, there's a kind of irony that runs throughout my own work, in which the design of maybe modernist, industrial, utopian ideals, I'll just jam all those things together that prove to destroy the city that I was born in, Detroit, and currently live in, still work in. I like to jam that up against a language that says something else. This is a mural I finished last year. That I'd been working on since 2019, not far from where I live, the neighborhood that I live in. And as I stated earlier, much of the work that I do as an artist responds to a kind of cultural capital that you see in printed ephemera from the past, advertising promises that are never followed through on. When I decided to found a press in 2010, Rotland Press, fine publisher of excursions into humor and despair, I really wanted to start making some cultural capital. But most importantly, I wanted to expand the conversation beyond my studio practice, that there were conversations that I couldn't conjure alone in my own work, and that I wish to extend to others. I don't consider myself a protest artist in my studio. I consider myself a satirist who sometimes has good days and bad. Sometimes I lean into nihilism. And then other times there's an idealism that I'm trying to cling on to. But I wanted to get out of my own headspace and invite others by publishing what they wanted to protest, by publishing what they felt was something that needed to be cracked. In 2015, I would say up until 2015, most of the material that I published was outright nihilism. It was dark humor. And it was sort of wallowing in itself. But in 2015, I rushed into production this tabloid that was responding to the shootings in the offices of Charlie Hebdo. But I didn't want to have a simplified conversation about Charlie Hebdo. I wanted to understand what was going on. Why were these images being responded to a certain way? And it became a kind of jumping off point to look at what satire meant. What, was there a punching up or a punching down? What did it mean to image the other? There were all these conversations swirling around online, and I wanted to pour those into this particular publication. In 2016, I had the privilege of publishing this book, The N-Word, Paintings by Peter Williams, a rather incredible artist whom I knew when he was teaching in Detroit at Wayne State University. Peter, immediately following the events in Ferguson, started to create a series of paintings in which he created this superhero, the N-word. But the idea was of taking that racial epithet and turning it against those who were delivering it in the form of this superhero. And I was fascinated by this series and how it dealt with the policing practices of violence towards African Americans, how Peter was imaging that. And I wanted to make this small monograph. I still wish that these paintings in particular could be shown in the city of Detroit. I tried unsuccessfully in 2016, and I hope they still can be. During the interim of Trump, a lot of friends are asking me, why aren't you marching right now and protesting? And I thought, well, I'm not good at that. I feel powerless in some way holding a sign, but I want to do something that extends beyond my immediate community. I publish, that's what I do well. So I thought, okay, let me pour some things into a publication, an attempt at making a periodical called American Flytrap. The first issue is the post-truth issue. And the idea is that that could be distributed beyond the immediate zone that I would be marching in. So it would reach out to many more. I was very pleased that, let me just stop here for a moment and take a little pause and talk about Americana. It was influenced, I should say, by an earlier satirical publication by a man named Alexander King. George Grosz, the great satirist, participated in this publication, Gilbert Seldes. And this is from 1934. And it has this remarkable editorial signed by King, Grosz, and Seldes, in which they don't identify them by any political stripe, but rather as Americans that are outraged by a particular environment, particularly a corporate environment, moneyed influence at that time. I was lucky in American Flytrap #1 to include this great image by Sue Coe because I wanted American Flytrap to have some punch. And I was very pleased that Sue delivered some of that punch. I want to have a little bit of bite in the publications that I put forth. So it was an honor to start working with Sue. Later, last year in 2020, I published a small chapbook of relief prints by Sue, American Fascism Now. It was a collaboration between Sue and Stephen Eisenman, who wrote a text explaining what American fascism was in the past, American history, and what it is now in the present, and building a bridge between the two were Sue's incredible images that really broke it down to the specifics, the basic specifics, in a very clear and forthright way. The design of that publication was based upon Die Pleite, The Bankrupt, a publication from 1919, designed by George Grosz, edited by John Hartfield and Gross's and Hartfield's cousin Wieland Hersfeld. And then in 2020, I was trying to figure out what to do as the pandemic got underway. My printers were closed down, so I decided to create a annual publication called The Plague Review that was made available for a period of time for free online on the Rotland Press website. And then earlier this year in January, all of the issues from 2020 were gathered together and published in this digest form, this hearty digest form. And I have to say it has about 60 contributors from around the world, writers, artists, cartoonists. Chris is in it, Sue is in it. The list is really quite wonderful of those who responded very quickly to my open call. And here's an interview with the great artist Mark Thomas Gibson, who's a remarkable satirist. Images by Labor Camp, Peter Szahalski, and Marcel Zama. But, in the midst of all of this, I also was publishing material like The Angriest Dog in the World, which was a reprint of an absurdist comic strip that David Lynch produced in the 1980s and 90s. And, what is important to me is that I often go back to a place of looking at the larger picture of folly and absurdity and publishing that kind of work alongside work which is immediate and needs to respond to pressing issues of the moment. And moving forward, Rotland Press reached its 10th anniversary last year in the middle of the pandemic. And I'm hoping to strike that balance between work that takes a kind of longer absurdist view, sometimes nihilistic, certainly embracing satire, but also hoping to respond to the here and now, which is not something that I necessarily am always able to do in my studio where I'm alone in my headspace, but it's important to invite others into this much larger, more immediate conversation. Thank you.
Okay, great, Ryan. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to throw it over to Stan Waney. So, Stan, it's all yours.
Stop this.
Okay, thank you. So in this talk, I think I represent the view of the other. Here is the page for Argo Bargo Books, which is my publishing company. I publish Christopher, Sperendio, our host. So Argo Bargo, it's great that that we end up being in that order, because I'm gonna take over the whole satire thing. Argo Bargo is a venture for me that I wanted to take comics back to its satirical origins. Coming back through the Glasgow Looking Glass from 1826, or even Punch, like the very beginnings of what we call comics or bande dessinée, which were social comments on everything political or environmental that was going on at the time. So that's the idea behind Argo Bargo. Next. So, I mean, coming from a diverse background myself, half of my family is European, the other half is African, from African descent. When I was young, I always went back and forth between the cultures. I grew up in Canada, in a small working class city west of Montreal called Lachine. And I would go down in Queens, New York in the summertime on vacation. And back then was hip hop was emerging. And Queens, I think even now, is still like the world's most diverse borough. And the culture that was there and the different ethnicities that was always fascinated me. And even now when I grow up, it fascinates me. And to me, I wanted to, with these work, I wanted to explore the intersectionality of culture and consumerism, basically, or culture and race. Next, please. So this one with Burger King Kirk is particularly addresses that. If you look in the left corner, there's that famous scene in Superman 2 where he's battling General Zod. Only that in this work, Superman, the S is like a $, and General Zod has like the Mickey Mouse thing on, really to like question what we're seeing as culture. I've always felt that culture is like the means by which society imposes its views on the individual. And to me, these works and the work I do is to highlight that. Next, please. So this work is called Corporate Hell. It's never been published in its entirety. Stratazin out of Switzerland ran 4 pages. But if you look down in the right corner, Again, this idea of like the Christic figure of Mickey Mouse, or the Buddha, Jeff Bezos becoming the Buddha, or even Facebook King being Ronald McDonald. Again, this takeover by the corporate elites through culture, imposing their views on the individuals, is something that's that I work a lot with. Next, please. So these works, I try to work with the ink blot because I feel that some things cannot be said, some things cannot be explored, and the ink blot represents that. Represents, is it the hate in society, that thing that makes men a monster or a Christ-like figure? It's this intangible that I try and work with in my work, and always associate that with scenes of every day. If you look at the work on the right side, somewhere in the dream, there's like this, and this work was done like before everything blew up down in the States. But in this work, it's like you can sense that there's something happening with the policeman looking at the black man in the corner, upper corner, and it's those intangibles that I think protest art doesn't have to be in your face, but it's those things that you can be showing people. That's also a form of protest to me. Next, please. So this is a show I had down in Australia with all these pieces, and again, I love doing it in galleries because it's a space that I think we need to invest more in, because it's a meeting place, right? Art only has power to me when it's confronted with the public, right? If we can interact with the public and then bring people to realize, or even, you know, have them think about their environment, what's going on around them. I think that's one of the great purposes and great realization of art. Next, please. So this piece is Strange Fruit. For those who know about Strange Fruit, you know, it's like a sad story, but again, with the end blocks, all the hatred. And the backstory of Strange Fruit is that it was written by this Jewish communist teacher, you know, so Chris would probably love him. And he wrote Strange Fruit as a poem after he saw pictures of a lynching in Indiana. And that moved him so much that he first wrote it as a poem, but then it became a song. And then, of course, Billie Holiday popularized it through song form. And to me, Billie, like a lot of people, Nina Simone has sung Strange Fruit, but to me, Billie Holiday is kind of special because Billie Holiday's dad died when he was 39 years old because he was refused treatment in a hospital. And it's funny because when she sings Strange Fruit, it's so powerful to me that, you know, it represents, like, as much as Goya, it represents the art of protest, like right there. To me, it's as powerful as anything, as any piece of art that you can have out there. Next, please. Okay, so this piece is for an upcoming show. It's called For Those Who Chose the Sea. It's about those African ancestors who were either thrown overboard or chose the sea because they didn't want to be slaves. This piece is part of an installation. My whole thing is confronting illustration and installation art. This piece, I was reading the account of a slave ship and like the spaces that these people had for several weeks to cross the Atlantic. And so what I did is it's 3 by 3 feet high, and I was cutting the paper to match the size so I could draw these, and all of a sudden, like the physicality of the work kind of hit me like, wow, like these guys, these men and women are stuck in this 3 feet high space that I couldn't even I couldn't even like bend over and like, you know, occupy myself on that piece of paper. But physically, these men and women, you know, they were confined to that space. And it's funny because it reminds me of Sue's, you know, treatment of animals. And to me, like, this is, again, speaks to the power of art, that a piece of work. And at that moment, I kind of got emotional because I was like, realized like what that space meant, right? Until you read the notes and you read history and so on and so forth, you're reading it, but until you experience it, and me cutting that paper to size and really experiencing the physical space that these people had, you know, that's when it became like, took me to another level of understanding. And that speaks to the power of art, like the ability, not only as artists, but as spectators, to experience art is really important. Next, please. So this is an installation piece, and I mean, you know, props to Wall Space Gallery up here in Ottawa. This Wall Space is a commercial gallery, but they allowed me to like put this installation piece up, which was not for sale. So you know, I'm really thankful to them. This piece represents the children that got killed by police in the United States and in Canada throughout the years. The first one, and on the upper left corner, is Emmett Till, of course, which to me, like, I'm sure there were some before, but to me, really started the whole movement in the 60s. And if you look at the details, you never see their faces. And to me, it's much more powerful, the representation of this event. And they're linked by chains. And it's funny because the chain in this case could be like, you know, a necklace that you wrap around your neck. But in this instant, I think it takes another dimension. They're linked by these chains, but they're also chained together in their destinies, if you can say. Next, please. And these, of course, speak more to the modern day about child slavery and, you know, the cost of having a cell phone, what goes into our way of life. I know, like, you know, you talk to a lot of people and people say, well, it's not my fault that, you know, these people are suffering. No, but I think as an artist, it's, you know, we have this responsibility to show people that, okay, you know, your cell phone comes from that. Somebody had to like pay for your standard of living. And again, it's something that's, you know, really important to me to speak about. Next, please. So this this thing I did in collaboration with Frederick from History Before Us. This piece is the schooner Clotilda, which was the last slave ship that brought people from Africa to America. And the story of like the people on it was really amazing. How, you know, they kept their culture alive, their way of life. Even the gentleman we see here, Mr. Lewis, he married, you know, a shipmate, and they, you know, their ancestors are still there, still thriving. So again, you know, it's protest is sometimes is affirming what's right in front of our eyes, but you know, sometimes we don't really see. So to me, that's my whole shtick, if you want. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Stan. If you want to mute yourself, then
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm going to present just really quickly on my work, and then we're going to start a discussion, which I think will be super fun and interesting. So this is me inking my new book, Greenie Josephini. And my process is that I'm taking old comic books from the public domain from the 1950s, and I'm reworking them, I'm redrawing them, I'm rewriting them, and then scanning them and coloring them and aging them to make these sort of Frankenstein books. I grew up in Appalachia, and so culture to me was comic books. And living in a small coal mining town, the divisions between the workers and the bosses have always stuck with me. I could watch people draw all day long. So starting in 1988, I made collaborative public artworks that were community-based with an artist named Simon Grennan. And we call these early works socialized art. And we were among the few pioneering artists who did what came to be known as social practice. And on the left is a monument to the chocolate factory workers designed by the Chocolate Factory Union. And it was part of the Culture in Action exhibition in Chicago. And on the right is much later work with people that work at the Museum of Modern Art and at PS1. And it was a comic book that was also sold within the exhibition space, which was quite important for us. As an academic, I've merged my practice with my teaching and with my service to the university into a single stream. I've gone full Monty for comics. So I established the Comic Art Teaching and Study Workshop, which is a resource that holds original comic art, books about comics, ephemera, and out of that resource, it's a support for the drawing curriculum in the Department of Visual and Dramatic Arts here at Rice. But I also have curated exhibitions out of that collection and published books out of that collection. And then I even produced a documentary film about the artist Jack Jackson via Cats, and it was directed by my colleague, Brian Huberman. The foundation on which what I'm doing now is built is the situationist practice of détournement. Pardon my French. I'm from West Virginia. It's also thought of as hijacking, and today it's known as culture jamming. It's even sort of I think the sort of root of memes, which, now you know who to blame are the French students from 1968. And the idea with this culture hijacking is that and comics were used a lot, taking the original comics, redrawing them, rewriting them, and giving them a political message. And so I first began hijacking comics in 2014, which led to eventually to publishing this book in 2020 entitled Pinko Joe. And it's published by Stan's company, Argle Bargle Books. And the thing that struck me was that in these vintage comics, all the bad guys wore suits. Everybody wore suits. And so I just recast them as corporate lawyers and bankers, and I filled their mouths with business speak. And for this book, I used crime comics and also science fiction comics. And then coming out next month is Greenie Josephini. And Greenie is, of course, there weren't a lot of roles for women in these comics. They were mostly like victims or sort of two-dimensional love interests. And so I really had to dig deep, and I wanted a strong female protagonist for the second book. And so I used a lot of romance comics and war comics. And there's actually a lot of great women in prison comics, which I know sounds risque, but they aren't. They're just mostly about escaping from prison. Anyway, they're meant to look like old comics, so I redraw. I take the original source and redraw it, and then I age it and really brutalize it so that they have this sort of "I've been on planet Earth for 70 years" patina. And I take on the prison industrial complex, forever war, a lot of different topics I try to cover, but I'm also making a lot of jokes in there, which I think sometimes gets me in trouble. But what are you going to do? In addition to doing these big books, I've been doing these little mini comics. They're much quicker to produce, and I can respond more quickly to current events. This one I made on January 7th. I was too shocked on January 6th. So on January 7th, I sat down and started making this mini comic. And in this particular mini comic, in the middle of the comic, is a board game, Race to Save Democracy, which is fun for kids. Throughout the pandemic, I started using Instagram, even though I'm a little allergic to Zuckerberg. The museums and galleries were closed, and so Instagram was a lifeline to me. And I was able not only to sort of express my anxiety, but also connect with a lot of really great artists and really interesting people. And this is just sort of a sampling. I probably did, depending on my anxiety level, 1 to 3 drawings every day. And so if you really want, if this tickles you, then certainly go to my Instagram, because it's loaded with this nonsense. And basically just kind of anger. So when the COVID capitalist heads for the door, it's time to quit. And so I just want to thank you all for coming today, and stay tuned now, because we're gonna have a little discussion between ourselves, and we're also going to take some questions from you, the tuner inner. Remember to subscribe to follow me on Instagram. How'd I do? All right. So I'm going to ask a question to Sue first. So Sue, as you were talking and presenting your work, which was amazing, and thank you again for coming today, but it seems exhausting. I know my work exhausts me. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Can you give my students some advice about motivation?
Because I can make vegans. So for every drawing, I can make someone that will change their lives. and stop consuming animal products. And there's a direct relationship between the work. Even if I make one vegan out of a book or a show, that's a lifetime of not murdering other persons. And it's my curiosity too. I don't have the answers. So I do work I'm curious about. Not that I'm not telling people what to think. I'm asking myself how to think. I'm not telling you to look at my eyes, which are a sort of blue-gray. I'm asking you to look through my eyes into a slaughterhouse. I'm not asking you to look at my work. I'm asking you to look at what I'm seeing. And that's very inspirational to carry on. Thank you for the question.
That's an awesome answer. That's surprised the hell out of me too. Stan, what about you? What gets you out of bed in the morning, or in the middle of the night? I guess, right?
Middle of the night.
You suffer.
My kids get me out of bed in the morning from all the noise. It's ever since I was a kid, it's the classical answer. Ever since I was a kid, I was drawing, but it's this feeling that you have of otherness, that you need to communicate with other people. That there's another point of view. There's another world out there. Even though we're all sharing the same space, there's different points of view, and it's almost like you're drowning. It's a bad example for the times we live in, but it's almost as if you're gasping for air. And you wanna tell people, listen, this, not only am I here, but this, it's not about you, because I believe, it's one of the things that made me kind of shy away from comics, is this new thing where people, it's all about the super ego. It's all about me exposing my little suffering. But to me, it's like through suffering, you meet the other. There's a universality of human beings. And even like Sue says, like human persons, this suffering that you just need to go towards the other person and say, listen, I'm here, we're here, and we're all sharing the same space. And let's try and make it, something that's pleasant, instead of everybody like, doing what we're doing right now, right? To me, it's like, it's so important. I couldn't imagine like doing anything else. It's like this need that I have to tell people, listen, it can be another, there's another way, and even like, I mean, for my kids, right? I want to make sure that there's a future for them. I want to make sure that they're able to like breathe, that they don't have to wear like hazmat suits when they go out in 10 years, because global warming is like so ran out of control. I don't
It
want.
doesn't exist, right? It's
no, it's a Chinese hoax, I know, but
it's a
still,
Chinese hoax.
and
So,
and
no,
yeah.
Dave, finish your thought. I'm sorry.
No, yeah. To me, that's what it is. That's what it is. I get up and I don't know why. I want to not make a difference, but communicate with people.
Cool. I'm going to change tracks. I know the title of the panel promised a lot, right? The new protest art. It was a big lie that I perpetrated to get you all here, just to hear my friends who are amazing artists and delightful people to talk. So audience, if you want to leave now, you're not going to get it. But I do have some more questions. So Ryan, the life of an artist is mysterious enough and fraught enough, why complicate it by establishing a press?
You know, my partner asks me that every day, every morning. You know, as with every, I mean, I want to sort of piggyback that last question in order to answer this question, and that is, you know, there's still that question of why. You know, what gets you up? What gets you moving? Why do this? And I think that, you know, there's a need to try to make sense of a lot of things. And that whole bunch of things can feel very overwhelming. I mean, you know, I think am not alone in being, as an artist, as a maker of images, somebody who has a lot of anxiety. And I find that putting that anxiety into a form is a way of, it's not about containment, but it's about trying to understand why the hell that anxiety exists to begin with, why there's a mess. I mean, you know, growing up and living in Detroit, as a child, you know, there's a real psychological disaster zone here. And, you know, my parents, my upbringing, there was a lot of anger, a lot of rage, there's racial divisions, there's the failure of the post-war American dream, there's a destruction of the environment. I mean, it's just a lot. And I think that making as an artist and making as a publisher relate and bookend one another, in the sense that I'm trying to make sense of it for myself, but I'm also trying to connect with others who are trying to make sense of this, because I alone cannot figure this out for myself. And I would like to share what I'm doing, but also share what others are doing and trying to make sense of it all. Because as far as I can tell, you know, looking out my window on my neighborhood and in this city that I live in, that I returned to after having been away from it for a while, it hasn't been figured out. And we make the same mistakes over and over and over. And maybe we're doomed to do that. I don't know. That's the nihilist in me that says, fuck it. You know, we're all just like gonna end up there. But I'd like to try.
So let me pivot with that then, that nihilism, and pivot to Sue. And I want to ask about in this time of digital everything, is there still a space for printing, the print? The answer is yes, but I want you to elaborate. The answer is of course, but you make paintings, you make drawings, you make prints. Can you talk a little bit about why prints?
Because printmaking is a community. It's not isolated. One isn't isolated by technology. So I could theoretically go anywhere in the world and we can get a piece of wood, a piece of scrap wood, like my friend Dr. Avery in Somalia, where he was working in a refugee camp. And he got bits of wood and he could just he used his scalpels to carve images when he was going insane. He was the only doctor with 50,000 people dying, and he just started hacking away at the wood, and then the patients were bringing more wood, and it was very much therapy for him. It was something, he didn't have Photoshop and PowerPoint and this technology, but he had the wood. And I think with printmaking, people can see what you're doing. It's not stealing something. So when you do the sketches, when I'm working in a slaughterhouse, when I did, but there's a slaughterhouse near me now, is people can see what I'm doing. The workers can see it. They can share it. They can have the drawing. They can have a print. It's not taking anything from anybody. And if I've got it wrong, I'll make it right. And hopefully, and it's giving people, it's testing out the work in real time. Is this truthful to you? It's your life. And so they can say, yes, that's truthful. And then I'll go and show the work. So I always want to go back to the source of where I drew. Is this true? Is this okay with you? And so, yes, printmaking is a collaboration. It's a team. It's a beautiful thing, and it keeps us sane. Thank you for the question, Chris.
You don't have to thank me. You should really have your own channel though, Sue. I mean, I would tune in every night for now.
Stop it. You guys are so brilliant. And I just feel such shame that I'm not as articulate. All of you comrades are so profoundly brilliant, and I'm just here shaking, thinking I'm alone with this screen. What's going on?
No, Sue, no, you're right here with us. Well, let's talk about that though. You know, like artists are viewed with suspicion in the U.S. Like, you know, we're not considered to be the good ones, and everybody is always taking a shot at us. So, you know, like, Stan, why are you such a masochist? What is wrong with you that you want to do this?
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. You know,
to be different than everybody else.
So 70,000 years ago, in Europe, the shaman went underground and he was drawing all these animals very realistically. And some people have hypothesized that what he was doing was kind of magic, right? By drawing these animals, he was understanding these animals so they could hunt them better. By understanding them, by drawing them, they could understand them, and they could bring back that knowledge to their group and then go out and hunt. And when they would kill the animal, they would respect the animal because the animal would give them life, right? And so the shaman and the artist are closely linked together. And way back when, and it's still the same thing today, the artist is that person that brings back knowledge from whichever place it is and affects change in the society. And yes, the artists, you know, most often will suffer, will not be understood, but it's something that's needed. You know, like the shaman, the artist, to me, the artist doesn't choose to be an artist, right? It's something that he has to do, and it's something that's really important. As important as, you know, scientist or whatever, the artist is as important because a society needs a moral. We know what happens when you take out poetry, when you take out philosophy, when you take out art from a society. We know what happens because we're in it right now. So, you know, I'm not an artist because I want to be. I'd like to make money and screw over a lot of people, but I just can't.
Well, you've got time. You've got time, right? You know, people don't like sarcasm in Zoom, Stan. They don't understand it. It makes them mad. But there's no protest furniture. There's no protest wallpaper. Why is there protest art? Anybody? Should we have protest furniture?
Well, you know, somewhere, I don't know. That's something I should look into.
Talk to the guys over at Bauhaus, you know, before the Nazis, and they'll tell you there is such a thing as protest furniture.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good answer. Yes.
Fascists don't make good art, do they?
Not anymore, apparently.
Yeah, my students don't like it when we joke about Nazis either. So
this is an interesting idea, though, because I think in the beginning, I mean, this is, you know, things turn south often when there's a set of ideals. Because when, I mean, I think the Bauhaus is a good point. There's this idea that we're going to change the world. We're going to introduce, you know, design to the masses, and they will understand that art needs to be woven into their everyday life. I mean, there's a form of trying to turn back, you know, trying to set society on the right track by way of culture, mass culture, but it always gets appropriated. You know, that protest in some ways gets appropriated and turns into the commodity, the uber commodity, you know? But it has happened. I mean, what was the Eames saying? The best for the least for the most? Not anymore. You know, now it's like, what is it? Design within reach, design out of reach, you know?
It's more like eat shit, losers.
Right, exactly. It's the old capitalist, you know, slathering drool on everything.
And I'll just tell you guys that the chat has gone a little crazy about protest furniture. I think I stepped in it when I said that. So I retract. You know,
It's my fault.
Well, I'm a fucking clown, right? I mean, I think that's what, that's all that society will let me be. And so that's, you know, I'm going to be a good fucking clown.
Well, how about thinking of it not necessarily as protest, but as journalism? Because we have a deficit in journalism. And so as opposed to protest, where is the truth of the matter? What is the underlying structure for anything? So the attack on journalism and journalists globally is extreme. And now, you know, we can go to Rupert Murdoch and so forth. But, you know, when Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle, this was an artwork and it was also the truth. And so I don't think of this as protest, or I think of it as revealing something that's underreported. And if you think a woman in the United States is raped every 3 minutes, a woman and girl is raped. When in the history of art, where are all the rape paintings dealing with that reality? They didn't exist. You had Rubens. So that's just one thing I tried to do with rape paintings, is record these events. So what is the heel of the boot crushing the mass of people's reality? And in terms of the working class, their reality is crushed. Absolutely. So where is the art dealing with the working class reality? Where are the artists funded to deal with the working class? From the 1930s and from socialism, that would have come from unions. Unions, bread and roses, would have funded that work. It wasn't protest. It was the reality that most people live within. That is absolutely censored, denied in this so-called culture.
But you know, that again, you know, speaks to the importance of art and to the importance of protest, because even though the tools of repressions have gotten much more refined, you still have some artists making art. You still have some artists saying stuff, right? And I think journalism, you can buy newspapers. Hollywood to me was always crap, and it's even more now. So film, you can like take film and do whatever you want with it. Art, people have been trying to like do that with art for ever since, you know, for forever. But art has like this thing where it constantly regenerates itself and will not let up. And to me, that's, you know, and Sue, you're a perfect example of that, right? Of the art constantly not being bothered by, you know, trash like Murdoch and so on and so forth. And still people are speaking truth to power, you know, through art, because journalism obviously doesn't do it anymore, even though a lot of people are trying, you know. I'm thinking of Chris Hedges. I'm thinking of a lot of people that are trying to speak truth to power, but, you know, they're being crushed. But art has like this dimension where we can confront people directly, and it's, you know, it's necessary.
And it doesn't take a lot of money to make a drawing, to make a painting, to staple some pages together into a pamphlet or a booklet, and to pass it out. I mean, there is, you know, what I'm always trying to break through to my students with is this idea that despite art schools promoting this structure that you've got to sell in the gallery, you've got to get it into this commodified space. You know, don't forget the idea that you have these simple tools to say any damn thing you want and get it out into the world bypassing some of those zones of commodification and just get it to people, like mainline it. And it is so direct, you know. We can do
Exactly.
that, and that's where print comes back in. You know, if you want to bypass social media, you can still do it.
Exactly.
So,
You know, you can burn book from here till tomorrow. You'll still have that kid with a pen and paper, you know, 25 cents pen, and he'll say, "Oh, look, the emperor's naked," and laugh, and everybody will look at him and laugh with him. You know, you can't. And to me, to answer an earlier question by Chris, why do you do art? It's that power. Not that I'm attracted to the power, but because it's something that it doesn't require you selling your soul to do. You can just speak your mind, and that's it.
So if there's any other questions from the chat, now's the time to jump in there. If there's something you want to ask one of the panelists. And while we're waiting for that, I just wanted to throw out a kind of general question about propaganda. Do you think when we say protest art, is that propaganda? Is there a difference? Does it matter if there's a difference between art and propaganda? I think, Sue, you describe yourself as a propagandist. Is that right?
Yeah, the origins of the word were 15th century Roman Catholic Church that had offices of propaganda. It just means to propagate ideas. The word fell on evil days during World War I, when the masses realized how many troops were dying. They called it enemy propaganda. But before then, propaganda just meant sharing ideas, knowledge. So yes, what we do is propagate ideas. That's what we do. It's not a negative, in my mind, to propagate ideas.
So one question is an ask for recommendations for obscure, absurdist poets, novelists, songwriters, podcasts. Ryan, you're a collector of weird things, like we all are, but you're famous for it. What do you got?
boy, that's I've got shelffuls, and I don't know where to begin if one is looking for contemporary iterations of that, because there's a whole history to go shoveling into. I can always talk about what I find that when I publish something, or even when I make my own work, there's this little moment of like I'm an animal that needs to sort of burrow into some earth, that it's like, oh my God, I got to find out everything I need to about this artist, about this maker. And right now I'm spending a lot of time looking at two individuals. One is animator and filmmaker from the 1950s, Frank Tashlin, who made a lot of cartoons for Warner Brothers, but also ended up making a series of movies with Jerry Lewis that, if you can get by that, you can see that they're actually critiques of corporate society in 1950s America. They're very subversive for their time. So I've been kind of looking at that. But I've also been looking at a lot of Polish animation from the 1960s, Jan Lenica, Lenica, and Valerian Borowczyk, who made an incredible film called The Games of the Angels, which Terry Gilliam lists as one of the great animated films, which was actually, it's a strange, poetic response to concentration camps, because Borowczyk's family certainly was in Poland at that time when the Nazis were, had set up their death camps. And it's a strange, extraordinary little film that you can find on YouTube very easily. But those are things. Yeah,
sorry, would you mind to just type that in the chat? Type a couple of those names you mentioned in the chat, and that way folks that are here,
I can do that. Yes,
they can see that.
Yeah, but it's good to have little obsessions once in a while. So those are the things that I've just been, I buy up all the Blu-rays and spend too much money on books, and then I just devour it. But it's a good and bad habit depending upon who you ask. But somebody had raised a hand earlier, and I think they just typed out a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you can type your stuff into the chat, that way everybody will have it. And I'm just going to ask Stan real quick. Stan, do you have a top recommendation for obscure culture?
That's a good one.
Favorite book right now?
I wouldn't know where to begin. If only like the German cinema from the turn of the century. I'm really into, like right now I'm into rewatching the all of Kurosawa movies. I'm into reading the in Canada, especially in Quebec, we have a movement called the Les Automatistes. They're poets who write poetry. That I could write down a few names, I guess. But I don't consume commercial stuff. I don't have a TV. I don't watch movies. I don't watch Netflix. I'm always, I'm always down in obscure land.
And Sue, what about you?
I'm going to go with this one.
What is that?
War Against War, Friedrich, banned. This is as shocking today as it was in World War I. It's absolutely shocking. Banned by forever. This has been banned. But every person should look at this. It's a collection of photographs of what poison gas does, what bombs do, what fascism does. Brilliant. And I would add Blake's Auguries of Innocence, which is hardly very well known, but it's so brilliant. Blake, this could have been written this minute, Auguries of Innocence. He never illustrated it himself. That's what I recommend. Thank you for asking.
So we're about an hour and 20 minutes into this. So maybe it's, I think I only paid you guys for an hour. So, now you're working overtime for no money. I'm a capitalist master of the first order. I think if anybody has anything in closing that they'd like to say, a parting shot, as it were. I know that we didn't get to many questions in the chat. It's my fault. You can just write me hate mail, and my email is ryan@stanfest.com. I'm used to hate mail, so
Spoken like a true capitalist, dodging the bullet. Yeah, very good.
Ryan, closing thought?
Not really. This was a lot of fun, though, and I'm happy to have had the chance to do this.
I'd like to do this every fucking day. Can we just meet every day for an hour and chat? We don't even have to show slides next time. Just chat.
See, this is why I publish. I mean, in answer to your earlier question, the complications of adding publishing to being an artist is you make new friends and you find your fellow travelers, as it were, and you can enlarge the conversation. So that's what's happened today.
So Stan, any parting shot? It's nice to see you,
turn off the TV, turn off the radio, go see some art, go meet people in the street, have a conversation, a real one, not on Facebook.
I don't like what you're
and
saying.
just like regain your humanity.
It's gone. It's lost.
No, not you, Chris. Other people. You're a lost cause.
We're gonna talk this weekend, right? Yeah, we're talking this weekend. Sue?
Well, it's been lovely sharing this platform with all of you. You're wonderful. The struggle continues, and to any art students, draw every day. Just keep drawing, keep drawing.
Yeah. It's awesome. So on behalf of my friends and the Department of Visual and Dramatic Arts at Rice University and Printed Matter in New York, and through the good grace of the other in the ether, thanks everybody for coming. See you. Maybe we'll see you tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.